Greetings, everybody. This is Eric Cook. Appreciate you joining me for the first of what I hope will be many monthly Banker Education Series webinar shows. Today we're bringing you episode 1. Today is April 23rd, 2015, and today's topic is on .bank, the new top-level domain extension, and we are having the privilege of Mr. Doug Johnson from the ABA joining us today. Before we get started, I want to cover a couple of housekeeping items. We are hoping, and I suspect that we will, just because based off of my conversation with a lot of my banker friends, I get a lot of questions, and I've been able to say, wait, hold those, because on Thursday we're going to have a chat, and you'll be able to get all those answered. So I encourage you in your control panel, which is likely floating off to the right-hand side of your screen, we're going to go ahead and use the question and answer box there, so go ahead and type your questions in. I'll be monitoring those during today's presentation, and Doug will go ahead and entertain those questions either periodically throughout the conversation, or we'll definitely make sure to leave some time at the end. Also want to make sure everybody knows that today's webinar is being recorded, and it will be made available at my website over at Powered by WSI. I have that showing on your screen right now, and you can always get to Powered by WSI, either do BES for Bankers Education Series. You can go to the services banking industry and link that way. And when the actual webinar is recorded and made available, this Register Now button is going to turn into a View button, and you can click on that. It'll take you to YouTube, and you'll be able to actually watch the archive there. Last little item that I'd like to mention is we have scheduled, if I scroll up, next month I'm going to be joined by Kathleen Craig, who is the president and founder of a company called HT Mobile Apps, also located here in Michigan, and she is going to lead us on a discussion talking about Apple iPay and what that means to community bankers, how that changes things with consumers, security risks, other opportunities. So it's going to be a good conversation. Her company does mobile apps, and she's very well versed in the Apple Pay environment. And I know a lot of banker friends that I have are curious on how Apple Pay works, and is that a threat or a friend, or maybe a little bit of both to them and their community bank. So hopefully you'll be able to join us when you come back to this website. You can go ahead and click on the Register Now button, and that'll get you registered for that session with Kathleen. And then lastly, if you scroll to the very bottom, some of you may be joining because you saw something in LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, or maybe were referred by a friend or a colleague. If you'd like to get reminders on these sessions on a monthly basis, you can go down here, sign up for the email reminders, and that way when we have new shows that are being posted and promoted, you'll get notification and be able to join us every month. With that, I'm going to go ahead and work my magic, switch the presentation controls over to Doug, and he is going to be able to share his screen. And while he's doing that,
actually, Eric, do me a favor. My screens are acting kind of goofy, so why don't you do the advancing for me? That's going to be, I think, a better way to do it today. Thanks. I got two screens.
Let's go ahead. Okay. So we'll do a quick little thinking on my feet here real quick, just a second. Let me pull the presentation back over to me.
Sorry for the late notice on that.
That's okay. And let me pull up that presentation real quick. While I'm doing this, why don't you maybe tell a little bit about yourself for those that are not familiar with you, where we met down in the warm Florida Keys, and I'll share my screen when I've got it up here. So just a second.
Great.
Go ahead.
Well, first of all, Eric, thanks for having me today. I appreciate it. We always look for the opportunity to talk about the new top-level financial domain .bank and .insurance as well. For those of you that have been following this, you know that it's been 8 years in the making in terms of really working with and through ICANN to try to make sure that we develop a process where we serve the industry as best as we possibly can, and our customers as well, as we deploy financial domains. It's a situation where early, when ICANN back in 2008 actually made the determination that they were going to expand the internet, we actually told them at ABA and otherwise, just don't do it as to financial domains. because we felt that there was going to be some level of confusion associated with those domains, because we weren't going to be able to control them all. And so, Eric, if you advance to the next slide, I think that gives us a little bit of a flavor for what we've come up with in this world. If you start to cursor through these, you'll see that since ICANN started to deploy these domains, there have been a wide variety of them that have been deployed, and by the end of next year, there'll be over probably 1,500 new domains like .science, .dating, .travel. Eric has been bugging me forever about .guru. He wants to be wants to be a guru, and I told him, it's a free country. Go up and sign for it. You don't have to prove you have a following, although obviously you guys are followers. You're on the phone with him today, but you don't have to prove any bona fides in .guru, and that's kind of the point behind our concern about some of the other financial domains. And then there's others like .realtor, of course, where as we know, the National Association of Realtors protects .realtor with their life. Basically, they have a very stringent verification process on the front end, as you would expect, and only brokers and realtors are really allowed to play within that domain. So obviously, from our standpoint, we wanted the financial domains to look much more like .realtor and much less like .guru. We needed to have strict verification and other types of requirements around it. And so slide number 3 kind of demonstrates where we are in terms of financial domains. We, as I've indicated, and I'll talk about who we is in a moment, we're able to capture, apply for, and have approval to operate .bank and .insurance. And there's a couple different things which we've done around that, and the couple bullets on this slide demonstrate that. We really wanted to make sure that we had strong verification requirements around the domain, and we also wanted to make sure that we had a strong level and a very high level of security around the domain as well. So we've been working with the industry and with security experts to really try to accomplish that. And so slide 4 goes into a little bit more depth in terms of what the process really looks like. Back in 2010, when we actually decided that we were going to apply for the domain, we began the process of ramping up a company called FTLD Registry Services, LLC, and that's the company that essentially we utilize to apply for and now to operate .bank and .insurance. And .bank is ahead of .insurance. And so this is where the royal we comes from. We at ABA, through our Corporation of American Banking, own a third of FTLD. The Financial Services Roundtable is our strongest partner. They also own a third. You may be familiar with BITS, the technology group within the Roundtable. They're the ones that are most actively involved. And then we have a variety of financial services investors, both internationally as well as nationally, trade associations and companies, both insurers and banks, that make up the other third of the ownership of FTLD Registry Services. So that LLC has obviously been very busy lately, and as operating managers of FTLD, what we have done is retained VeriSign, who runs .com, for instance, to be the registry for the domain. So we essentially have the same registry that .com runs on. And we've retained Symantec to do the verification of you as potential registrants. And so in the middle of that process, you see are the registrars. And those of you that are familiar with the domain name process know that there are a wide number of registrars that are out there. GoDaddy is one of the ones that people are most familiar with. What we are presently doing is essentially qualifying registrars. We've got 16 of them that have qualified. You see some of the names there, like Mark Monitor, et cetera, et cetera. Other names haven't been put on this particular slide, but we continue to bring more registrars on, but they have to sign a registry agreement that essentially indicates that they will abide by our verification process. So you as a bank will pick a registrar, or maybe more than one registrar if you have different names that you're going to be applying for. And essentially what the registrar will do is pre-populate your information so that on the day that .bank becomes available, the registrar will essentially send that information to VeriSign. VeriSign will send it across to Symantec and for verification, and the Symantec will communicate with VeriSign to the extent that you have been verified, both as a financial institution and also the person that submitted the registration has authority to do that within the institution, but the registrar can send that in for you. And so you may have heard of pre-registration processes, which really don't give you any particular additional footing because there is no such thing as getting preference in line associated with pre-registration. But that doesn't mean you can't pre-populate your information with the registrar. In fact, that's very important, so that on game day, and I'm about to go through the timeline for you, that your institution is properly positioned with the domain names that you would like to be operating or defending in this brave new world that we're entering into here. Now go to slide 5, Eric.
Actually, before we do that, I know since you mentioned pre-registration, I know I shared an email with you from one of our clients earlier that talked about pre-screening. Is that the same thing or just a different name for the pre-registration, pre-screening process?
Well, what the registrar will do is not necessarily pre-screen, but because that would assume that the information is going to Symantec for some sort of action on their part. The registrars are going to be aware of what the registration requirements are, because we have our policies up on the FTLD website. So they will be able to advise a bank as to what kind of information is necessary for them to be able to validate themselves. So that's essentially what the process looks like. It's not really a pre-screening per se in a formal sense, but I think in an informal sense, Eric, that's just as good a word as any, because the registrar will know, what the requirements are, and of course their interest is ensuring that the registrant is successful in registering the domains they want, and so they'll advise the bank as to whether or not they have the qualifications, for instance, because they have rights within the trademark clearinghouse to be within the sunrise period I'm about to describe, or whether or not they have to essentially register during general availability, which I'll also talk about in a minute.
Good. One other question, and I do have a lot of customers that also use these folks. The question is, will Network Solutions become one of the approved registrars? I don't know if that registrar list is complete and final now, or if there's others that may be added, but
it is not final.
Any idea?
Yes, we would very much encourage Network Solutions to become an approved registrar. I think the most important thing that you as customers can do if you have Network Solutions as the registrar you use now is to encourage them to become an approved registrar. I think the more pressure they get on the client side, the more inclined they'll be to become an approved registrar. If not, you'll have to go to a different registrar.
There you go. Don't discount the power of social media when trying to exert your influence on them becoming a .bank registrar either. Tweets and other sorts of posts to publicly make sure that they know you would like it are certainly powerful. So
yeah,
good. All right.
Yeah, good question. So here are what we view are really the key differentiators within .bank. As I really told you, they really fall into two different buckets, either operational requirements or specific technical/security requirements. And we've already talked a little bit about the fact that there's strict eligibility requirements in terms of who can participate. But there's also requirements associated with name selection. What kind of names can be registered? For instance, we have made some difficult decisions, frankly, in terms of name selection. For a good example would be common names. There are about 55 names that we are not going to essentially allow to be registered in this round, or at least initially within the round, and that's because names like First National and First State and Citizens and Farmers are used by a wide variety of institutions. And what we didn't want to do, and what our banks told us they didn't want us to create, was a situation where there was one winner and many losers, where there was one bank that was able to apply for First National and win because they got there first, because it is first come, first served. And then all the other banks essentially do not get that name. And so we felt it was fairer to the banking community to just take those names off the list of names that would be available. And so you can find that list both on the FTLD Registry Services site that I'll point you to later, or the ABA.bank landing page, which I'll point you to later as well. And so you'll see the list of names that are not going to be available, because it would have created either one winner, many losers, or I think even as a worst case, a situation where we would have banks bid against each other for the use of the name. And that's just not what we're about. We're about trying to create an identifiable, protected space for your customers and yourselves to do banking business on an internet basis. And we didn't feel that it was productive to have banks bidding against each other for those sites and enriching FTLD when there's really no incentive for us to do that, because we're trying to serve the community. So there's also a prohibition against proxy registrations, which means whoever owns that domain is going to be very visible. Your bank, you'll know that, I mean, as you go into who is, and as you see the registration information associated with the domain, it's going to be clear that the bank owns it. And I've already talked about the fact that there's mandatory verification of all registrations, but we don't expect a lot of abuse within the site or within the domain, actually, because these are financial institutions that have been verified on the front end, and so we expect them to be good actors. But nonetheless, under ICANN policies, we have to monitor for any potential abuse in terms of how domains may be used or otherwise. So on the technical side, those of you that are familiar with the various aspects of domain name security, DNSSEC, know that ICANN now has required DNSSEC to be deployed and all the security around DNSSEC at the root, and the root means at .com or at the .bank. We are going to require those higher levels of security at the second level bank domain as well, and I think that's an important component. But I think one of the more important things are the next three dashes here. Multi-factor authentication at the registry and the registrar level is important, because one of the things which we have seen in terms of abusive activity in domains is someone hijacks the administrative rights associated with a domain. They somehow get themselves authenticated as an administrator of the domain, and then they have any opportunity to create all sorts of havoc by doing so, and actually defraud customers. And so having additional levels of authentication of those that can administer the domain at the bank or at the core processor or otherwise is an important component. And having enhanced encryption standards in terms of data, which includes also email authentication records. And those of you that follow email authentication methods know that DMARC and DKM and SPF are the standards associated with email authentication. And you also know that any of these things are utilized by financial institutions on a voluntary basis within .com. But I think the important piece here is the fact that these are mandatory technical requirements within .bank that will enhance our ability to communicate with our customers and enhance our ability to ensure that our customers are aware that when they land on a .bank site, they have a much greater potential of trusting that they are actually at a validated bank site because of all these levels of security around it. There's difficulty in spoofing bank sites that are in .bank. There's just a much greater ability to have our customers trust that they're actually communicating with the financial institution. And I think what that has done, when I talk to marketing folks, is given marketing some thoughts that, hey, we actually might be able to use this channel to communicate more effectively with our customers where we don't have any trust in that channel within .com because of the level of spoofing and phishing. And the very fact that there's some additional enhanced technical requirements around spoofing and phishing, I think, is going to stand us very well in terms of being able to demonstrate, to our customers that here in this world where cybersecurity is getting increasingly more difficult to maintain, that here is the industry doing a positive, proactive step to try to enhance security as that cybersecurity environment becomes more difficult and more sophisticated over time. So Eric, let's go to slide 6.
Okay. While we're kind of, I guess, on that topic, one other thing just from a validation perspective, and not that I want to compare the banking industry to the drug industry, but here in Michigan we're starting to hear some radio commercials of a conversation somebody has with their daughter about how he got sick because he bought his prescription drugs and it wasn't using the .pharmacy extension for the website that he was going to purchase his prescription drugs, and how they were coming from some offshore vendor and they weren't reliable. I've had a couple of other banks that have heard that commercial, wondering if there's going to be a similar consumer awareness effort done like what the pharmaceutical industry, and maybe they're not even the ones that are necessarily behind it, but trying to instill that level of confidence with consumers to get them to adapt or embrace the .bank domain extension?
Yes, absolutely. And thanks for bringing that up. We have contracted with a PR firm, and the PR firm is in concert with a technical firm building a variety of different tools and resources that we can use generically and you can use specifically as financial institutions. For instance, there'll be an ad campaign which will be developed. I don't know that it's necessarily going to be a television ad campaign, but it certainly will be viral. But it will be very similar to what you saw within .pharmacy, whereby we want to develop that level of trust in our customers and that level of visibility for our customers that, when they come to a .bank site, they have a higher potential of realizing that they're actually communicating with a real financial institution, just like they would want to be communicating with a real pharmacy. And we're actually looking to try to develop some visual cues as well. Of course, we're all familiar with the extended validation green bar. I'm just making this up, but we had some discussion about trying to develop a visual clue such as a blue bar associated with banking. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I'm saying that what we're thinking about is actually trying to build, some level of visual validation as well, that I think, as you well know, is very important to consumers, because that visual cue is so much, for all the obvious reasons, more easily recognizable for the consumer. And if they don't see it, then they know that they're not at a legitimate site. And we think our greatest measure of success, Eric, is frankly going to be when customers are going to a bank because they're not at a bank site, a .bank site, and wondering why, whether or not this is a valid site, calling their bank about it, and we think that's really going to be the primary measure of our ability to demonstrate that we've moved the market, is when our customers demand it. I think we're going to see other things similar to that too. A good example is .organic, where you can say a lot of the same things about .organic that you can say about .pharmacy in terms of really understanding that the purveyor of organic food has been validated. And so if you're buying organic food from an internet site, if it's at a .organic site, you have an understanding that, that particular company has gone through that process. So I think you're going to see a lot more visibility in 2015, the second half of 2015 particularly, across a wide variety of domains. It's been very subtle so far, but I think you're going to see greater visibility. There's only about 450 domains that are up so far, and again, we've got 1,500 that are going to be up eventually. So Eric,
what I've heard a lot of banks say is they plan on buying the .bank but just having it redirect to their .com. But hearing you say that, what I'm suspecting will happen over time is consumer awareness is they'll do the opposite, is they will take the .com and eventually redirect that to the .bank. So even though consumers are typing in .com, eventually it will resolve as .bank to provide that reassurance if and when consumer confidence kind of mandates that. So I can see that being flipped.
Good point. So cursor through build this slide out. It probably will be several of these. What you'll see, as I've explained the internet financial world and how it's going to change, these are the examples of the various buckets of financial services domains that are either already operating or going to be operating going forward. The two in the middle, .bank and .insurance, are ours. And when I say ours, I mean they're yours. They're financial services driven. But there's a variety of others that are owned by entities outside of financial services industry. And you can see where a great amount of confusion can occur associated with these domains. And for instance, you've got .mortgage, and then in the payment side, you've got .cash and .money and .pay. On the card side, the lending side, there's going to be .credit, .cards, .credit card, and .loan, and then you see a bunch of them on the financial investment side as well, .trading, .yada yada, a bunch of them. So I think that because none of those are owned by financial services companies or by the industry, they're owned by independent entrepreneurs, there's going to be two things that we need to be mindful of. The first thing is the customer confusion that can be created by customers thinking that just by virtue of the fact that they went to .mortgage, that they're at a legitimate mortgage company or lender. And that's not the case. There's no verification requirement associated with anybody that gets in .mortgage. There's no verification requirement in any of these other domains. And so you can see where a customer would have a false level of confidence in those domains. And you can also see where these domains could be susceptible to domainers and squatting, where, for instance, yourbank.mortgage, someone gets yourbank.mortgage, and they come to your bank and they say, we have your domain in .mortgage, we'd be glad to sell it to you. It's not going to be unheard of for that to happen. We've already seen that at ABA, where companies have come to us and indicated they have gotten an ABA, because we're ABA.com, that they've gotten ABA.anti-disestablishmentarianism, and they want to sell it to us. And so there'll be a lot of that nuisance and a lot of that mischief going on as well. And so it's in the new internet financial world, it's all about trying to educate your customer so that your customer will have an understanding of which domains are valid and which ones are not at the top level. And also thinking about how you want to protect your intellectual property and your reputation within these other domains. And so we'll talk a little bit about that as we go through the timeline. So Eric, why don't we go to slide 7?
Okay. If and when somebody does get that extortion request on the your bank name .mortgage, are you going to comment, or maybe you can comment now, on the ability of a trademark being able to be used in the fight against that to wrestle it away without having to pay $5,000 or $10,000 and be extorted?
Yep. Absolutely, Eric. Build out this slide. I think it's about 3 clicks.
Yep.
Yeah. So nice lead-in question. I'll give you $5 for that, Eric. That's worth it. Because there are really two different, what I fondly call game days. And the first game day is May 18th, 2015, and that's really what's called the opening of the sunrise period. Now, the sunrise period is dependent upon you having trademarks on your domain names and having them registered with the national, not the state, but the National Patent and Trademark Office, and also having them registered with ICANN's Trademark Clearinghouse before May 18th. It's a little late to do that now if you haven't done it already, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't be doing it to think about protecting your intellectual property rights in other domains, which is Eric's point. Because what participation in the ICANN Trademark Clearinghouse does is it gives you notification. It doesn't prevent someone from registering your bank name .mortgage, but what it does is it gives you notification that someone has just tried to do that, and then you can avail yourselves of the ICANN dispute resolution process as it relates to trademark protections. But those are the exceptions, really. Most banks have not trademarked their domain names, and there's completely understandable reasons why that's the case. The biggest reason is there wasn't an expectation that ICANN was going to open up such a tremendous round and essentially let the market dictate how many names would be available, and the record shows that there's going to be about 1,500 of them. And so the question becomes, how do you protect yourself within all of those domains? And you can't really do that, but unless you've got the trademark protection. But what you can do, and what you might consider, is defensively filing within, unfortunately, the other financial services domains. It's a discussion to have, with those that are responsible for branding and reputation within your financial institution. You'll have that conversation to make some, or come to some conclusion as to whether or not you think it's important to protect your brand in those particular domains. I know some banks may actually consider even using .mortgage, but that's another consideration in itself, because I would not be surprised. I don't want to disparage, completely disparage the domains, but there's just going to be a higher propensity for abuse. Let's just face it, there's going to be a higher propensity for abuse in those domains because they're not operated by the industry. So if you have those trademark protections, and if you have your trademarks registered within the ICANN Trademark Clearinghouse, on May 18th, that's when, on a first-come, first-served basis, you can register the domains that you have those rights toward. But for the vast, vast, vast majority of the industry, June 24th is game day. That's when, as it indicates on the slide, verified members of the banking community can register. And it's 8 p.m. Eastern. But that doesn't mean that each and every one of you have to be at your PC at 8 p.m. Eastern to launch. What it means, and going back to that earlier slide that showed all the registrars, is that by that date, you will have had to have your internal conversations about what domains you want, what registrar you want to use. You will have gone through and you've looked at the pricing associated with each and every one of those registrars, made a determination if there's additional services that you may want from those registrars, because some registrars will have different pricing for other brand protection services. They may be able to help you with some of the reputation risks that you see in some of these other domains as well. So those are good conversations to have, and you will have had to have those conversations and understand which names you want before June the 24th, so that the registrars or registrar that you choose can essentially hit the button on your behalf. They'll have a script file which will have all that information in it, along with all the information for their other customers, and we'll launch it to VeriSign. So that's the process essentially, and that's what you have to be prepared for by June the 24th, depending upon what you perceive as your level of risk. Clearly, each institution has a different perception of what their risk is associated with their domain name or names, and each institution, um, I think, well, to back up a little bit, I think a lot of us believe that financial institutions have managed to figure this out, if you will, to some degree in .com and develop distinguishing marks or domain names within uh, the .com or the .net space. But that doesn't mean that they wouldn't want to go and do something a little bit more closer to their name within .bank. And that doesn't mean that there couldn't potentially be some conversation among banks that have common names to come to some common naming structure on a voluntary basis, purely a voluntary basis. But it wouldn't be unheard of for banks to get together and not collude, but to think about, okay, is there some sort of geographic nomenclature that we can use in our domains so that we can prevent some customer confusion and not have customers inadvertently misdirected to different domains in .bank. And so if you've got a common name and you have other banks that you know of that you think you can potentially have that conversation with and broaden that to the greatest extent possible to the other banks with that common name, I think that's an opportunity to frankly have a little bit more common sense rationalization of the names within the domain space. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I am in every case, but I am aware that there is that potential, and I think it does provide an opportunity. So
on your
Eric, go ahead.
Yep. We've got another question, and it kind of goes back to your statement that if you've not got your trademark by May 18th, it's probably too late at this point. Maybe talk a little bit about, because I think there's really two components here. There's the trademark process of getting registered with the United States Trade and Patent Office, but then there's also the mention of getting that registered with ICANN's clearinghouse. And the person that asks the question, I know that she has the trademark already reserved, but has commented about how ICANN's clearinghouse has just been a real pain for her to get that into the system. Yep. So for those banks that don't have a trademark at all, why is it too late? And then if you do have a trademark, maybe talk about getting it into ICANN's clearinghouse and the possibility of making that happen by May 18th.
Sure. First of all, I think we all recognize that it's hard to get a patent or a trademark through the Patent and Trademark Office at the national level, US PTO, even in a year's time. So I think that if you don't have your trademarks already at PTO, that's a non-starter. But that doesn't mean you wouldn't want to think about it, because ICANN's not over. They're not done. There'll be other rounds, and we're going to have to, unfortunately, in other rounds, probably protect ourselves in .bankers and .banking, and think about what we want to do with those. We might not want to operationalize them because we want to drive people to .bank, but ICANN is not going to make any distinction in those other potential financial domains. They're going to allow them, just like they allow .insurance and .insure. So I think broader. Don't think about this as discrete times only. While you have missed the potential of doing that for the sunrise period for .bank and potentially for .insurance as well, because that's probably going to happen very late this year or maybe the beginning of next year. But the process at ICANN's clearinghouse or trademark clearinghouse, I've seen sometimes it take a month, sometimes it take less than a month, sometimes it take 2 months. And what I will do is provide Eric with the contact information of an individual at Deloitte who might be able to help you understand where you're if you're having some difficulty. So Eric, I'll do that for you because of course obviously every bank has its own little idiosyncrasy in terms of what the hiccup might be at the ICANN trademark clearinghouse level. So there is a contact person at Deloitte who's been contracted with ICANN to run this process that I'll provide the good Mr. Cook.
Excellent.
Okay, so let's go to slide 8. So this is the landing page for ABA resources, very visible on our front page or our home page. And I would suggest that you do sign up for updates. You see the box on the right-hand side. And we have frequently asked questions that we're continually revising based upon questions that we're getting all the time, because there's always new ones out there that are good ones we haven't thought about. We have links to both the common names and the approved registrars off of this site as well. And then in the middle, there's a webcast. I know Eric's going to stream this, which will be helpful. And if you want to get another view with pretty much the same information, but sometimes different questions, there's a streaming video in the middle of that page. Are you ready for .bank? So I think what you're seeing is a large number of resources that are going to be available to really help bankers through this process. And slide 9 is the FTLD Registry Services slide, I believe, that landing page. And if you really can't sleep at night and you want to read all of FTLD's policies associated with name selection and name allocation and anti-abuse and et cetera, you'll see the policies drop down. And so I think that both of those pages are really important for you to follow as this process continues to move really through May into June and beyond, because one of the other deliverables that's coming out of our process is an implementation guide. Obviously, there's a lot of technical aspects associated with this exercise, and obviously some of those technical aspects have implications toward core processing and internet banking service provision. And for instance, on April the 30th, we have a webinar which is designed specifically for core processors and internet banking service providers because they're so important to this process. They can click that button for you, or they can engage the registrar for you. There still needs to be a bank contact for verification. There still needs to be that linkage. And the bank still needs to populate the information or provide the information to the core. But we recognize that in many cases the core processor has a very vital role, or the internet banking service provider does. And we don't want to stand in the way of that. In fact, we want to have those types of companies behind the wall as well. We fully welcome cores and internet banking service providers to apply for and operate .bank domains, because it makes absolutely no sense for them not to have the same level of security as the bank does, right? Particularly when they're operating your domain potentially as well. So I think that's another important component as well. So slide 10, I think, starts to drill down into one of the registrar pages. I just wanted to up the policy page. So just skip through this, Eric, and let's move on. Yeah, I wanted to go through. This is just the very top end of the FTLD registrar page. The one that we have on our ABA page, of course, looks very similar to this. But I wanted to drill down into one of the registrars just to give you a flavor for what they're doing on their registrar pages. So let's go to slide 12. And what slide 12 does is it drills down into the LexEnergy.bank page. And we're seeing this with all the registrars. And one of the common questions I get is, well, this registrar is from Europe. And yes, we have a number of international registrars because this is an international domain. But each and every one of them, I believe, at the end of the day, is going to be developing a .bank page, which does mimic, frankly, some of the information that's on the other pages that either we have deployed or FTLD Registry Services has deployed. But then there's information which is particular to the registrar as well, and that's what slide 13 is going to demonstrate. See, slide 13 goes down into the payments page, and you see, or rather, what the fees are, and you see that LexSynergy first quotes in pounds, so you get an indication of where their head's at geographically. But you see that for U.S. dollars, the price on an annual basis for the domain from LexSynergy is going to be around $1,000. We at FTLD or ABA do not control the retail price. Each of the registrars controls the retail price, so that's why I say it's best to shop around between the various registrars, and I think these prices may end up showing some flexibility as we get closer to game days. But there's also going to be different services that different registrars are going to provide as well, and so get comfortable. Security comes at a price, verification comes at a price, so there are some sunk costs associated with operating a higher secure domain, and so that's the reality. What we have found, and we've done substantial research around pricing just to make sure that we weren't seeing some retail prices out of the registrar market that were out of the question or out of bounds, and what we found is that there's a high degree of acceptance associated with pricing below 1,000, but as you start to get pricing above 1,000, there ends up becoming some additional price elasticity. People tend to start to balk, but I think that our experience has been that's where the prices are starting to really revolve around $1,000 or less on an annual basis. So if you go to slide 14 here. So there's a number of things that, and just to go through the build here, there's a number of things that I've really alluded to, and this is just kind of the tick list associated with those. I think that if you haven't organized your team to include those components, that now's the time to really do it. Get your marketing, legal, your channel folks, and your IT folks together, and others that you think are important to really start devising your bank and your insurance dot strategies. And as we've discussed, what are you doing to protect your trademarks and your reputation risk? What have you done to discuss with your core processor your needs and have an understanding of what they will and will not do for you, because each processor, to state the obvious, is going to have their own perspective on what they will or will not do. And consult, as I've indicated, with not an approved registrar, but shop around on the basis of service as well as price, and get comfortable with a few or one. And if you don't see one that you'd like to have on the list, as we've talked about earlier, encourage that particular registrar to get on the list. I think it's important. The more registrars that we get on the list, the greater level of price competition we'll have in the domain. And I think that's important for the ability of us to make sure that the retail price is as palatable as possible for you. So let's go to slide 15.
Question came in, just a quick second here. So with regards to general availability being June 24th, I know you indicated 8 p.m. Eastern as the time officially when everything is going to get lit up. Is that going to be standard globally? So,
well, it's actually
those banks in Europe that
midnight Greenwich is the time. So
okay.
Essentially, that's where the 8 o'clock Eastern comes from.
Gotcha. So there's not going to be any time zone advantages to anybody getting access to it earlier than others. It's the set time, but just convert it to your own specific time zone.
That is correct.
Perfect.
So, and again, go through the build on this one. Number of questions. Obviously, some of them we've talked about, some we really haven't. I think the first one is one that clearly comes up a lot, because you obviously have to, by those dates, either for sunrise or general availability, have to have an understanding of which domains you want and have to develop that relationship with the registrar and pre-populated your data with the registrar. But the rest of the timing is completely under your control in terms of when you move your activities to .bank or what you keep in your existing .com domain, and what redirect you do from .com to .bank, and all that is completely under the bank's control. And so that's the whole purpose of the implementation guide, is to help you and your core processor and others think through that process. And that should be available toward the end of this month. But again, there's no magic to the May or the June dates in terms of moving those activities, to the .bank domain. We obviously would be very encouraged to see some operational .bank domains as quickly as possible. That would be just great. We want to see deployment. But again, we want to stress that it's completely under your control, and that's going to be the same for .insurance as well. .insurance, like I said, is a little behind. We didn't want to run these two at once, and so that's the sequencing that we decided on. And as I indicated, I think we're seeing .insurance as going through the same process toward the end of this year. And then, as I keep harping on, what are you doing to really think through your reputation and your intellectual property risk in those other financial domains? I think that's always going to be something that I think we're going to have to continually stress to our customers as well, that those domains are not operated by the industry. And so let's go to slide 16, Eric.
Okay. One of the things, and when you talk about the other domain names, I know this came up a couple of years ago for some banks that had originally thought, when the XXX domain extension came out for the adult movie and entertainment industry, there was some fear that people would go out and register yourbank.xxx and use that as a way to hold hostage. I don't think we really saw that happen, but a good friend of mine who practices law with a focus in social media shared with me that recently the .sucks domain extension has been released, and big companies even like Adobe and Microsoft have offered up either they will or they won't, because that domain allegedly is going to be in the $2,500 a year range. And it's one more of these things from a digital reputation protection. Do you want to proactively get yourbank.sucks and make sure nobody else gets it? Because it used to be yourbanksucks.com were domains that you would acquire, but you could snag those from GoDaddy for 10 or 15 bucks a year, no big deal. Now you're looking at $2,500 if that is something that you're concerned about. So it's certainly an interesting time when you get into some of this.
It is, and I don't know if any of you first are a fan of John Oliver, who used to be on The Daily Show and now has his own show on HBO, and he did a little ditty on Michael Bloomberg and .nyc. Of course, there's some geographic domains out there. .nyc is one of them. And Michael Bloomberg actually filed for 400 defensive domains within NYC. And I'm somewhat vertically challenged, so I can go down this road, but some of the ones that he actually acquired was Michael Bloomberg's Too Short to Be President.nyc, Michael Bloomberg is a Dweeb.nyc. I mean, he went and took a very expansive view of defensive filing within the NYC domain. So there is a little bit of that going on, maybe in some cases a lot of that going on, and unfortunate it is that is happening, because think about what Eric just said about the pricing of .sucks. That sucks in and of itself. Because you clearly see, I mean, you clearly see the business case, right? I mean, you clearly see what they're up to here. Now, those are not great Americans that take that tact and say, well, we're going to enrich ourselves by having people defensively file within that domain. There's something a little screwy about that. So
yeah, I think Adobe has come out publicly, at least last I knew, and said we're not going to play that game. We're not going to do it. Microsoft, on the other hand, I believe stated they're going to work to reserve it, and they feel that it's just kind of a cost of doing business in the digital world.
yep,
So
exactly.
it's
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
But either way, I agree with you. I think it sucks.
Yeah. So as promised, here are the links to those 2 pages. Visit them early and often. Sign up for updates off of the ABA page. And myself and my partner in crime, Sam Lisker at ABA, that's our contact information. Feel free to call either of us if you have any questions, or shoot us an email, because that's what we're here for. That's literally about 50% of our lives right now as we get toward launch, to make sure that we have as smooth a launch as possible and that we answer your questions to make it that way. So, Eric, I don't know if you have any additional questions here, but I enjoyed the opportunity. I really want to take every opportunity possible to have these conversations so that we make sure that we're on the mark as we deploy these.
Yeah, very good. You did get a compliment, and I will tell you it was from the attorney friend of mine who shared that originally, that said your comment was very funny, and I would say very well timed. So congratulations on the comedic relief. Nice job.
Well, good. I thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So
one
other.
It's not the end.
Yeah. One other. Just again reconfirm. It's 8 p.m.
Yes,
correct? In
correct.
the evening, Eastern time, on
That's
June
right.
24th, in the p.m. So you can be at the computer with a glass of wine, just finishing up dinner, waiting to submit your request, kind of like what we did during Y2K, leaving the New Year's parties and sitting in front of the file server to make sure that the bank continues to operate and the world doesn't come to a screeching halt on January 1st, 2000.
Right. Or have your registrar sitting at his computer with a script file at p.m. on that evening, hopefully without a glass of wine, so that he gets the job.
There we go. Yeah. So I'll make one final call. If there's any other questions, feel free to go ahead and type them into the question and answer area, but we are coming up on the 1 hour mark. So as I said, this session will be recorded and will be made available. If you go to poweredbywsi.com/BES for Banker Education Series, we'll go ahead and we'll provide a link there that you can click on to go access this. What I encourage you to do, you may be 1 or 2 individuals within your institution. This is probably something that you may want to distribute to senior management, maybe even as part of your board training. And you can certainly share that link with your board of directors or other folks in your institution just to make sure that they're up to speed on what's going on. I know the ABA's had some good resources as well, but you're more than welcome to share this. And then make sure while you're at the Bankers Education Series page on our website to sign up for alerts and notifications on future episodes, and be sure to register for next month, May 21st at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, where we're going to be joined by Kathleen Craig from HT Mobile Apps and chat a little bit about Apple Pay and kind of the alternative ways that people are paying one another these days that either does or doesn't involve their financial institution. So with that, I'll do one quick last little take a peek. We just had somebody indicate it's June 23rd, not June 24th. Is it June 23rd or June 24th? 0 a.m. UTC, June 24th, which would be June 23rd at 8 p.m.
Well,
Doug?
If you go to the ABA page and look at the timeline, it talks about June 23rd, opening at 8 a.m. on June the 23rd. And then there's also a link which says check for your local time. So just so you have no confusion in terms of what time that is for you.
Okay, let's go ahead and we'll do that real quick. And so if we go to .bank, Again, you're probably more familiar. So
go down, you see
bank timeline.
See the bank timeline, go down below there, and you see right there, learn more about it. And then you see go past the readiness period, past the sunrise, to the past founders, to general availability, and you see June 23rd. And then you also see the link that allows you to check for your local time, just in case you want to make sure that you've got that right.
Okay. I may have been saying June 24th. Let me just go back, because this does say 8 p.m. Eastern on June 23rd. So,
right.
Yep. So it looks like there was a little bit of a typo in the slides, because it looks like the slide does say general availability.
I apologize for that if that was an old slide that I neglected to change.
Yep. All right. We just did that to make sure people were paying attention. We'll make a note of that. So obviously we're good there. So excellent. And then one last question. While we're on this site, can you direct us to the domains that will not be available on this .bank site?
Yes. If you look down to on the right-hand side, reserved names.
Yes.
View the financial names unavailable for registration. That is.
There we go.
List. That is the list of common community names that will not be available.
Excellent. Very good. And here's that document, which is just available as a PDF. You can go ahead and pull that down. Yep. Good. Excellent. Okay. Great. Excellent. So, yeah, this has been good, and thank you for the last few questions, especially the clarification on the date. So it is June 23rd at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. And now that we have that clarified, I'll put that actually in the notes on the webinar recording. So, excuse me. So with that, we'll go ahead and we'll close this first episode. Doug, thank you so much for kicking things off. I knew this would be a well-attended session, and it's certainly something a lot of our bank clients have got questions on, and I appreciate you being part of the inaugural launch of my Banker Education Series. So this has been great.
Great. Happy to do it. Have a great day, everyone.
Excellent. Thanks, everyone. Have a good week. Bye-bye.